Okay, looks like we are live. We've got Brother Gavin, Brother Praise. I know it's a late night stream, but we've got some debate prep, some human evolution to debunk. Debate prep, I mean, we've got Gavin here who has a debate. When's your debate, Gavin?
It's Friday evening in New Zealand, SFT. It's right now. It's Thursday evening, about 6:45 p.m. So to me, it'll be tomorrow night.
Awesome. Well, then everybody in the chat, please support Gavin. Gavin, if you want to give us the link later, we can put it in the description box. So we are all there to support you. It's nice to see we've got quite a bit of people in the chat, even at 2:45 in the morning. It was kind of a last minute stream, but I've been busy all day prepping. My wife and I are going away just for a couple days, but I mean, we'll be back on Friday afternoon. So we should be having a stream, I believe, on Saturday. And then I'll be debating again on Modern Day Debate on Tuesday. I'll be debating our favorite, Dr. Ron Garrett, on biblical creation and scientific evidence. So that should be fun. We got a lot to look forward to. This isn't going to be an incredibly long stream, but we're going to make sure that we address a few things, as well as go over a few possible arguments or questions that may come up in Gavin's debate. So enough with announcements, introductions, and whatnot. Why don't we, you know what, before we get started on anything, Praise, do you have that video that I sent you, brother? Oh, it looks like Praise is at it again.
Yeah, I do. I'm going to put it up for you right now. Or you can share it if you want me to do it. It's up to you.
No, if you can. I don't.
Oh, sure.
From my end, it doesn't usually work, it seems. The sound doesn't seem to come through.
Right. Yeah, that sounds good.
So maybe as you're setting it up then, Gavin, what are some possible arguments and questions you think are going to be coming at you?
Well, the guy that I'm debating he's a little bit difficult to read. He's enjoying a bit of celebrity status at the moment among atheists. One, because he's young. Two, because he's got an English accent. And three, because he's been toying around with agnosticism and then flirting with Christianity, and he's made good mileage on it, and he's built up a fan base. So the topics he chose to debate are: is Christianity superior to atheism, which is a no-brainer? But then the other one is Christianity true? So obviously I'm going to go to the resurrection, because Christianity stands and falls on the resurrection. But I know he's a diehard naturalist. You know, everything's naturalism, materialism. So he's an evolutionist theory supporter. He no doubt believes in abiogenesis, and that one day we're going to discover some unknown natural law that's going to, be the key to abiogenesis. But I really wanted to hear from you, SFT. What's a really quick and efficient way to cut an atheist off at the past, as far as the whole naturalism? The Earth was just popped into existence out of nothing, and evolution is where we came from. We evolved from this one particular cell. I know it's nonsense. But I do know that in the fossil record, there doesn't seem to be any evidence of any transitional speciation, like a half man, half chimp, or the kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like speciation change.
Right. Yeah. I would say when it comes to naturalism in general, and if your opponent holds to the position of evolution by natural selection, for example, the unguided processes, of course, that took a single-celled ancestor into all the life we see today. If you break that down, then if there was no evolution by natural selection for the naturalist, then your only other alternative is special creation. Now, the evolutionist, the atheist, the naturalist always wants to say that, this is a false dichotomy because proving evolution wrong does not prove a designer, they say. But that's just always been a ridiculous claim, because if we didn't evolve, then what's the only other alternative? It's either created or evolved, of course. But if you break him down there and tear down his worldview, I think even pointing out the fact that they're driving mechanisms like mutations and natural selection can only select from what's there. Okay, so when they looked at abiogenesis, which they have no answer for, and most of them will admit to that, there's a problem to begin with, the problem of chemical evolution, of course. But jumping right into evolution itself, you need the genetic information systems there. So already they have a problem explaining how those genetic information systems came about.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. I hear you, brother, because information doesn't poof itself into existence like magic. Information requires a mind.
So exactly. So, him being a naturalist, he's not going to want to talk about abiogenesis. He may want to just jump in and talk right about evolution by natural selection, look to the fossil record, like you said. What's funny is, as I indicated, their mechanisms like natural selection, it's a selection process. It keeps a species as strong as it can be. It can fine tune, for example, but it can't halt or stop, for example, genome degradation. It can't explain the origin of the first life and the origin of information systems to begin with. So chances are he'll admit that, there's no scientific evidence for abiogenesis, and he's just going to want to jump to evolution. That's when you hammer him with their mechanisms. We've talked about natural selection, but mutations. Yep. The fact that mutations are overwhelmingly deleterious. Okay. Yep. And even their best beneficial mutations that they could point to are reductive. They're degrading to the organism. They're functionally compromising. They think genetic mistakes over time, Gavin, is going to take a single-celled like ancestor into a whale, a human, a monkey, over billions of years of incremental changes.
I hear you. So if I say to him, which I hope I can fit this in somewhere, if I say to him, there is zero evidence in the fossil record of speciation change, what could he come back with to debunk me on that claim?
So when it comes to transitional forms, what I would say to begin with is I would point out, so I've got a book right here. Okay, I like reading directly from the evolutionary literature themselves, the technical the secular technical papers plus the books. So one I have here is from a famous paleo expert. He's cited very often. Anybody in the field of human evolution would know who he is. His name's Bernard Wood. The title of the book is Human Evolution, A Very Short Introduction. Now, when you go to the fossil record section, okay, now remember this, the evolutionists, their guard is down, okay? They have their guards down in their own books, okay, or in their own papers. This is where you see them admitting to their problems. And directly in this book, when you go to the fossil record section, he, being an evolutionist, admits that the fossil record is extremely fragmentary. It's extremely difficult to declare relationship in the fossil record because there's no genetics. Okay, so when we are determining ancestry, I'm notorious for saying it. Genes, traits, and genetics. That's what's inherited sperm and egg. Not a rock, not a bone, not a fossil, not geography. It's genetics. This is how we can determine relationship. What's related to what, for example. The evolutionists themselves, Bernard Wood here, admits that it's difficult to declare relationship because there's no genetics, and therefore it's hard to tell what is the result, for example, in anatomy and morphology, what is the result of convergent evolution versus, of course, non-convergent evolution. Do you know what convergent evolution is? Because I think it'll be good for you to hammer that point down, Gavin.
No, I have no idea, but I can learn pretty quickly.
Okay, good. So for example, anytime there's an inconsistency and lack of uniqueness in their phylogenetic tree, Gavin, what they do is they explain it away through a type of evolution called convergent evolution. Now, what this is, it's a rescue device, okay? It's the appearance of the same trait or character in independent lineages. So, for example, eyes or wings, okay? They'll say that wings and eyes have evolved independently multiple times. You know, for example, the wings on a bird and the wings on an insect or the wings on a bat, you know, they didn't inherit those from common ancestors, obviously. There's a bit of a different structure to it, of course. So it's hard enough to evolve wings and eyes once, let alone 20, 30 times, okay? So one big example of it, convergent evolution, for example, has to do with whales, dolphins, and bats, okay? They are the only mammals that have echolocation systems, Gavin. So on the basis of just gross anatomy, the whales and the dolphins are classified closer to the cow and other ruminants than to bats. But now if you look at their echolocation systems, they are now grouped together with bats. What's funny, if you actually look at molecular analysis, because there's a certain protein called prestin, okay? It's a sound-sensitive protein that's essential for hearing in general, and in particular, it is a part of the hearing mechanism of the echolocation system. When you actually do a genetic sequencing on this protein, what you get is discrepancies in the actual groupings and in the actual taxonomy. And this is looking at the genetics. In fossils, you don't have any genetics. And they're admitting that it's difficult to tell what was actually inherited with these structures, for example, or what was the result of convergent evolution. So if you see, the thing is, Gavin, if you point out that fact, that the fossil record is extremely fragmentary, it's hard to determine relationship, point out the fact that the evolutionary community themselves admit to this. Okay, if he wants to look to both, of course.
Right. So
because a good illustration is dogs today. Okay, how many breeds of dogs do we have? 400, 450, for example.
Yeah, lots.
All those 450 breeds are categorized in Canis domesticus. Okay, one species, and then the breeds themselves are subspecies, for example, because then you have Canis lupus, like the wolf, Canis coyotes, for example. There's more variation and diversity within that same species, Canis domesticus, than between species, Canis domesticus, Canis coyotes, for example, and even getting into the foxes, for example. So what would happen, Gavin, if all of those breeds of dogs were buried in a flood, fossilized, and 10,000 years later we dug them up? You know, all of these inferences, all of these false interpretations, they're not going to know what's related to what, because there's so much variation and diversity that they can look at a Chihuahua and a Great Dane and a Husky and declare different species by morphology and anatomy because they don't have the genetics, when in fact they're all of the same species.
Yeah, right? I got you. Okay.
Right.
So it would be it would be okay. It would be okay to claim that if he goes down the evolutionary route, which I'm pretty sure he will, being a naturalist, a fan of naturalism, it would be okay to say and accurate to say, look, the fossil record is the fossil and genetic record is so fragmented that we cannot tell. We just cannot tell anything about speciation change within the fossil and genetic record because it's so fragmented. We're just asserting.
Right. So you can, I mean, looking at morphology and anatomy, I mean, you can gather some conclusions.
Or making claims.
But the thing is, there's no genetics. So when we're doing breeding tests today, and oftentimes they will define species as, you know, an interbreeding population, for example. Well, you're not going to be able to tell that from some bones found in the dirt. That's why when I was debating RJ Downard, I asked him, I brought up these same points, how there's oftentimes more variation within the same species than between species. He didn't have any rebuttal to it. He almost just nodded his head like, yeah, you're right. And I asked him, how do you define species? He gave me the definition. Now, how do you define species when it comes to bones in the dirt? And then that's where they're trapped, because they say, well, just morphology and anatomy. And then your next question is, well, how can you tell what's the result of convergent evolution, right? Independent evolutionary histories versus actual shared relationship. Ultimately, the evolutionist says all life on Earth is related through common ancestry, but of course, like a bird and an insect, they'll say shares a more distant common ancestor. So that's the thing with convergent evolution, is you can have those same similar structures, but if convergent evolution is at play, they may have not have inherited that from a recent common ancestor is the point. But you don't even have to get that technical, Gavin. You just ask, how do you define species? By looking at some bones. They're going to look at morphology, anatomy. You're going to see and point out how circular that is. But you brought up transitional species, and I want to point this out. Okay, is the transitional species that they will point to, Tiktaalik, for example, Archaeopteryx. RJ Downard loves the reptile-like mammals, for example. He wrote a whole book on it. There's a select few that they can point to that you can argue about all day. Okay. But Gavin, I want to make this clear. Interesting mosaics is what I call them. You can even consider the platypus, for example. These are expected based on the design model. Okay. And I always use the example of a military assault vehicle. So for example, if we were in the military and we wanted to build a type of firepower, Gavin, that could move between, let's say the land and the oceans and then back to the land again. Okay. Or somehow just to go between those two environments. Well, simple. You would build a transitional form that blends the features of what? Ships and tanks. Okay. Now, overall, this vehicle would be inferior to a tank on land and inferior to a ship in the water, but it's superior both for the transitional environment between water and land. And we've built these. The Army has built these. They're called amphibious assault vehicles. They exist. The evolutionists would look at that and say, look, the perfect example of a transitional form, you know, because these amphibious assault vehicles that exist actually blend the features of land vehicles and water vehicles. So if they point to reptile-like mammals, or they point to Archaeopteryx, or they point to Tiktaalik and claim that, hey, look, you know, these reptile-like mammals, they have some traits consistent with mammals, some traits consistent with reptiles, or Archaeopteryx, some traits consistent with birds, and traits consistent with theropod-like dinosaurs. You know, interesting mosaic is exactly what we would expect, Gavin. So don't go down that rabbit trail. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, he cut out, so he'll be right back.
Did you get that video, Brother Praise? Because we can play that.
I did. Yeah. I just had something to say about that. your presentation there.
Amazing.
Hey, let's have a look in the chat. Look at this. We got a lot of night owls, eh? We've got brother Nicholas, the man, Caleb, Outcast America, Honesty Angel, George Bond in the house, Memory Lapse. Point out places like the Ashley phosphate beds and other places to Gavin, for example, to look into as well to show that dinos are found with man. Exactly. There are a few cases on Earth where it appears that man and dinosaur were buried together. Now, I wouldn't really expect to find too many instances of that because according to the pre-flood world, you'd be looking at different ecosystems, and dinosaurs and humans would have been not only on different elevations in the pre-flood world, but also living in different ecosystems. So them not living together, we're probably not going to expect them to be buried together. But as Memory Lapse pointed out, we do have a few instances where they are buried together. One way.
Is there a timestamp SFT you want me to go to, or just start from the beginning?
Is it there? I can't quite see. It just 7 minutes start.
Okay.
Or you know what? I'll do the context of this because before you start, then I'm also gonna, once it's done, I'm gonna screen share because there was a video today where Dan was pointing out, because I was pointing out that these retrotransposons and how incredibly functional and important they are in our genetics, like these transposable elements. For example, they play important roles in cell stress responses, various protective measures. I've got paper after paper that I always show in debates and in my books, but I was pointing out the fact that many of these retrotransposons have the start sequence, okay, for many different genes and even genes in the brain. And what these jumping genes can do is they can jump around the genome and turn on and off genes in a functional fashion, performing functional roles. So he scoffed and said, "Oh, that's not true. You know, that doesn't exist." But I've got a paper here showing that it's true from the evolutionary community. I'll screen share that. But I want also to have Dr. Robert Carter here explain it because I believe he explains it best. So press play so people can see.
First mention of the DNA, that linear string can literally be recoded on the fly. We don't tend to do that with our computer programs. I mean, we've always been experimenting with dynamically reprogramming programs, but it's really complicated and a lot of unexpected things keep happening. But the genome does it routinely. In fact, there's one point in development where your brain is producing millions of neurons a minute. And those neurons are produced in specific areas of the brain and then travel through the brain to get to where they're supposed to go. Well, how do they know what to do? Why is one neuron different from another? Well, it turns out there's these little things called jumping genes or retrotransposons that they used to say all retrotransposons are remnants of ancient viral infections. They're just junk DNA. They're just sitting there. They're parasitic. Well, actually, no. The brain cells have actually different genomes. The retrotransposons will pop out, go somewhere else, and stick themselves somewhere else in the genome of the brain cell. And that changes the code, and that changes the type of brain cell. Now we have type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, because these little retrotransposons. They discovered that in the mouse embryo. If you deactivate one class of these things, the mouse embryo will develop and then stop. Because a lot of retrotransposons carry the start sequence for different genes. And so then by them popping around and moving in the genome, they change the first dimension of the genome, which affects everything else downstream. In fact, in the liver cell, you have different chromosome counts. Your livers have to detoxify a lot of things. So they need lots of gene products. So in one way to do that, they just copy extra chromosomes. So if this liver cell needs a lot of copies of this particular gene, it'll just dink, 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 add more chromosomes. So we have different gene count, different genomes in each liver cell. In fact, there's another retrotransposon, going back a second, that is intrinsic to the binding of the placenta to the uterine wall. It's used in all mammals. In fact, without that so-called junk DNA, we would have no mammals. So that's incredibly functional, very...
You hear that?
Junk DNA is passé. We're going to do lots of talking about that.
So without that junk DNA, we would have no mammals. That's what he was saying. But it's functional.
See, exactly. So these evolutionists, and it's funny because I watched most of their rebuttal video today to parts of my book. They literally addressed almost nothing. And these incredible functional roles now discovered, okay, in these retrotransposons, which they assumed were junk DNA, functionless, vestigial remnants of our past. You heard Rob Carter say that, you know, they were assumed to be the ancient remnants of viral infections. And now these retrotransposons, you heard it, they turn out to be functionally integrated into the regulatory systems of mammalian genomes. And if these retrotransposons didn't exist in mammals, there would be no mammals. Because did you hear Praise with the what was it? It was the mouse embryo. So he was talking about this class of retrotransposons that exists in the mouse embryo. Okay, so obviously these aren't junk. Okay, intelligent design advocates, creationists, we've always predicted that this so-called junk DNA had important functional roles, because why would God build genomes of junk? And our predictions and expectations are coming true more and more every day. So this specific class of retrotransposon in the mouse embryo, Dr. Rob Carter was explaining that if it's deactivated, okay, what happens is the mouse is developing, okay, boom, you deactivate that retrotransposon, that class of retrotransposons, and then the mouse embryo will stop developing. And it's because it depends on the function of these retrotransposons, which the evolutionists assumed was junk. When I was debating R.J. Downard, I asked him, I said, okay, so were mice, were mammals just dying over and over again until they, you know, were mammals just not having babies until they got this retrotransposon somehow? You know, this is obviously integrated into the genetics. It's important. How do the evolutionists explain it? If you're an evolutionist, Praise, how would you explain the existence of these retrotransposons?
Oh, yeah, it would just be vestigial over millions of billions and years.
And then somehow, luckily for the mammals, because they wouldn't exist without them, luckily one of these vestigial remnants of an ancient viral infection co-opted some important functional role, and now mammals can finally have babies. Do you see how silly their philosophy is, Praise?
Yeah, that's a philosophy, all right. That's ridiculous, absurd.
Now, what Dr. Carter was saying here, Dan, Dan, the pseudoscience man, he was saying that, Standing for Truth doesn't know what he's talking about. And, this isn't true with retrotransposons. And as you can see, it is. Well, here's the rebuttal. Oh, Dr. Carter, a geneticist, marine biologist, he's a creationist, So, we can't trust him. Well, funny, because I've got the paper right here. Let me see. I'll pull it up and screen share just so people, and then so I've got this in one of my books. I think all of them. And they never address how these functional roles come about. Okay, so for anybody in the chat who's interested, and if you as well, Praise, if you want. Can you see the screen? Somatic retrotransposition alters the genetic landscape of the human brain. And you can read all about how the retrotransposons are mobile genetic elements that use a germline copy and paste mechanism, just as I was saying, just as Dr. Carter was saying, to spread throughout the metazoan genomes. And I mean, you can read, it's not just this paper, but this is the specific paper that goes over his, what he denied. But, he's only got a PhD in genetics, so what can we expect?
Robert Carter was actually on this channel.
Isn't the first law of...
Go ahead, Gavin.
I was just going to ask SFT, isn't the first law of thermodynamics an immediate defeater for evolution?
The first law of thermodynamics and the second law of thermodynamics both. Well, the first law would state that matter and energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Therefore, how did matter and energy come about? And then their answer would be, oh, matter and energy are eternal, right? They once believed in what was called the steady state theory, that the universe has always been in existence, it's eternal. Then they discovered that it is not eternal. They can see that the space itself is expanding. The second law of thermodynamics, which is the law of increasing entropy. Okay, so if we take that back to a point of least increasing entropy, that would be a point of creation. That would be a starting point, a beginning. So therefore, obviously, the universe can't be eternal. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, Gavin. So yeah, you point out the first law and ask, based on this law, how did matter and energy come about? And if they say it's eternal, then you point to the second law, which states that the universe can't be eternal. So they're stuck. They're stuck big time, brother. You got it.
Sure.
Amazing.
But even atheistic science itself says the universe had a beginning, a start point.
Yeah, exactly. Because of the advances in modern science, because of what we know about the second law of thermodynamics, what we know about the first law of thermodynamics. It's they have to, oftentimes they have to redefine nothing, for example, like Lawrence Krauss attempted to do. But if you hit him, because he's a naturalist, if you hit him on stellar evolution, cosmic evolution, chemical evolution, which is abiogenesis, he's going to have to concede that they don't have any scientific answers. Therefore, what he has, Gavin, is great faith. Great faith that it can come about through naturalistic means.
Right, yeah, special pleading. But Gavin, you need to add in there the Born-Guth Vilenkin theorem, which says with any expanding universe, it has a beginning, and that's a mathematical proof that the universe had a beginning.
Right, gotcha.
And remember, the first verse, Ken Hovind always talks about it. The first verse of the Bible: in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. There it is. What do we need that to come into existence at the exact same time? Time, matter, and space. They all have to come into existence simultaneously. In the beginning, there's time. Remember, the Bible predicted this in a time where people thought the universe was eternal, but the Bible predicted thousands of years ago that the universe had a beginning. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth, there's matter.
Right.
Time, space, and matter, Trinity of Trinities, all in the same, all in the first passage of the Bible. I mean, it's just so powerful. So everything in the Bible is consistent with modern science, Gavin.
Yeah. Fantastic, isn't it?
Oh, what's that, brother? You cut out.
I just said it's fantastic.
It's beautiful. Yeah,
I dig this God. Hey, what a cool God! I really dig this God.
Well, he's left us without excuse, right? And he's because the evidence is there. One of the fascinating reasons why I'm so intrigued by God's word, how I know that it's divinely inspired, is the fact that the accounts of, for example, historical human origins in Genesis, they make very, very strong scientific implications in genetics. For example, we can test, did we really all descend from just two people, Adam and Eve? We can test that with modern scientific data. And modern scientific data could falsify that. But yet it just turns out that genetics confirms that story. That was written thousands of years ago, you know? So the Bible is always accurate when it comes to science. And you can test the claims in the Bible to science. And it always comes back true.
Yeah. Sure. Now, just tell me, I mean, I've always subscribed to this kind of hypothesis or theory that making a negative claim like God does not exist, it's actually impossible to prove, because it's impossible to prove a negative. to prove that God does not exist, you'd have to be capable of searching every square centimeter of the universe to look to see if he was there.
Right. It's a fallacy. You'd have to know 100% of everything, when in fact we know 0.0001% of everything to make an
And if you
absolute
knew,
statement like God does not exist.
right,
You know,
right,
there's no
right.
such thing as an atheist, really.
Well,
Sure,
I mean, it's even
sure.
worse than that, more absurd, because the atheists has to appeal to God to even disprove God. I don't know if people know this, but to be a knower of something, it means you already assume some type of autonomy to even think within yourself or introspect. So to even try to deny God, you need God in the first place. Like, it's a hilarious, vicious circle for atheists.
And also, too, praise, if you make the negative claim, God does not exist, you're then using the invisible and abstract laws of thought, laws of logic, to make that claim. So where do those
Yes,
laws of
yes.
logic, laws of thought come from? Everything traces back to God.
Yeah, I mean, so we have metaphysics, we have physics, we have biology, we have, I mean, quantum mechanics. Oh, wait a minute, John, John, logical, probable, plausible, actually, he would say maybe use quantum mechanics, quantum biology to help your argument, because he says now biology cannot work without without some type of collapse of a wave function. You got to check that out. Last night I was talking with him about that.
Yeah.
And also remember, Brother Gavin, that what we see in our genetics requires forward thinking. Okay.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
exactly what we would expect given God,
Yeah.
through his foreknowledge. He's built living organisms, biological systems with redundancy. In computer code, redundancy is a good thing. No one's going to deny that. And in living organisms, it's a good thing as well. Epigenetics, the epigenome.
Yep.
These tags, for example, this rapid adaptation that we can see, once again, requires forward thinking. It's kind of like, I like you using the analogy like a spare tire. The evolutionists would look at a car and they'd look in the trunk and they'd see a spare tire and they'd say, look at this junk. Look at this remnant of our evolutionary past.
Right.
They'll look at it like it's
Residual.
redundant and useless. When in fact, you get a flat tire, okay? Suddenly that spare tire is incredibly useful,
Yeah.
because engineers and designers were thinking ahead. This required forward thinking. And this is exactly what we see in our genetics. So ask the question, from a naturalistic perspective, okay, how do evolutionary processes like natural selection, which sees the short term, okay, natural selection doesn't have a mind. It can't see the future. And mutations, which are genetic mistakes in a genome, it's like a typographical error in a text. How many spelling mistakes in a book of 300 pages is it going to take to change that book into, the instruction manual for building an airplane? It's not going to happen. Okay.
No.
So whatever answer they can give, if they would give an answer, usually it's a storyboard. If they're a naturalist, they are giving evolutionary processes a mind.
Sure.
Evolutionary processes don't have a mind.
No, they're blind, aren't they? They're blind.
They're blind processes. Natural selection sees the short term. How am I going to survive tomorrow? That's why a lot of these beneficial mutations break down pre-existing systems for the short term, because how do these organisms survive till tomorrow? They don't care about 100 years from now. Natural selection can't see the future.
Sure.
So, SFT, would you encourage Gavin to do prescriptive DNA as well? What for Neff, he goes into that, where it's algorithmic and there's prescriptive parts of our genome.
Absolutely, yeah. It's Brother Neff and John do a great job at that as well. that it's prescriptive information, algorithms, the type of code that you see in the DNA, okay, requires a coder. But what they'll say, like Godless Engineer will say, well, you can call it a code, but it's not a literal code, because when it comes to computer code, which is not even close to as complex as the genetic code, okay, we've seen engineers, we've seen designers, we've seen humans create computer code. We've never seen anybody create the DNA code. But that's just where that's just where their logic breaks down, because the fact that no naturalistic process can build up the information system that we see in living organisms, whether it's slowly or quickly. They like to, they think time makes it better for them, when time just leads to further degeneration.
Yeah. I was just gonna touch on that. The millions of years time scale that evolutionists or evolutionary theory clings to, isn't that really just an assumption? Because nothing is second law of thermodynamics. Nothing. Everything, once it's born or grown, it degrades. It breaks down. So the millions of years time scale that evolutionists use, would that not just be just would not the second law of thermodynamics just kill everything? Like rust never sleeps. We know that, eh?
Rust never sleeps. You can change the brakes on your car. You can change the tires. You can take your car in for regular servicing. You can be up to date on the servicing in your car better than anybody. But guess what? 10 years from now, your car is going to rust. It's going to rust out. It's going to fall apart. And in 20 years, it's going to be no more. You're going to have to get a new car, probably 15 years. And what's funny too, that you mentioned rust, that rust actually builds up slowly and almost in an invisible manner. Just like the genetic mutations in our genome, most of them are so subtle. They're invisible to natural selection. Natural selection sees the big things, okay? Natural selection sees the most detrimental mutations. You get a lion cub who's born with a shorter leg. He's not going to be able to run. He's not going to be able to get the next dinner as well as another one of the cubs or another one of the lions, or especially, some of the prey like a zebra. That it's going to die. It's not going to live on to produce and have more babies and pass on its genes. Natural selection sees that. Natural selection sees those mutations that are detrimental to our health. And it'll get rid of that. It'll amplify the best beneficial mutations, sure. But it does nothing against the rust. It does nothing against those mutations that accumulate from generation to generation, unnoticeable and undetectable. That's what rusts our genomes out, like rust destroys a car. You get what I'm saying? So yeah, we can, like the second law of thermodynamics, law of increasing entropy or genetic entropy. Yeah, with our bodies, we can eat healthy, we can exercise, we can increase our lifespans as much as we can. But guess what? Those mutations that accumulate in our somatic cell lines that age us, for example, by the time we're 60, we've got 40,000, 50,000 new mutations per cell that weren't there when we were born. So there's nothing that we can actually do to stop the eventual degeneration of our bodies, of species, and of the universe, like you said, Gavin. So it's all interconnected, brother.
So the millions of years time frame is just simply an assertion. It's unprovable, isn't it?
Well, I always say, especially if the debate is like my third debate with Erica, it was origin of species, okay? And I gave a lot of lines of evidence suggesting that the origin of species is the result of special creation, okay? Now, she kept wanting to go to the age of the earth, bring up dating methods, and I pointed out the fact that you can have all the time in the world, okay? Time is not the hero of the plot, because they like to think millions of years is going to save them. You know, they're going to get their single-celled like ancestor into a whale because of a lot of time. No, like we just said, the more time, the worse it is for them. The more time, the more extinction. The more time, the more mutation accumulation. The more time, the more degeneration. So sometimes it's a red herring when they want to try and go to the age of the earth issue, because they are losing in the realm of biology, genetics. So millions of years is no help to the naturalist, put it that way.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, praise, I've just had a dazzling revelation.
What is it?
Hydrated ferric oxide never sleeps.
You know what he's going to tell you, though, but the sun can create order and complexity and information. But see, here's the thing with what he's self-refuting, because the sun is destructive, and in the end, it would not bring in complexity or order or information then, because it's destructive.
The sun.
I've heard too many evolutionists describe Earth as an open system because of the energy that's fed to it from the sun, but they're missing the bigger picture. The entire universe is a closed system, and it's slowly degrading.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I was gonna. That's a perfect point, brother. You said it better than I could. And like Craig said, the sun rusts. The sun ruins your car. The sun ruins the roof of your house. The sun leads to skin cancer and other cancers. The sun is not going to help enough to allow for naturalistic processes to explain all the complexity we see. It's as we know, another rescue device.
Yep.
But that's why the second law of thermodynamics, it applies to the entire universe as a whole. And it applies to even the molecular level. That's why when we get down to our genetics, boom, what do we find? Things are winding down. Things are breaking down. That's why I always say, take this point. Gavin, people often say, okay, you believe Adam and Eve were perfect. You believe this universe was perfect when it was created. Adam and Eve would have had no genetic mutations. I like pointing with the fact that let's take this point of most accumulating genetic damage, okay? And take that back to a point in time of least accumulating mutational load. That would be a point of perfection. That would be a point of least increasing entropy. That would be a point of perfection in the universe. You can do that, or even in the in the genetics. So the second law disproves a universe that's eternal, for one. But the question is, if everything's winding down, who wound it up? Such a simple question, eh, Gavin? They oftentimes scoff at the simple questions, the simple analogies. But for the most part, I mean, atheism is not a majority. People use this argument from consensus all the time. You want to use an argument from consensus, why aren't you a theist? You know, atheists are this small minority, anti-science naturalists to claim that the universe could pop into existence from nothing. And by nothing, I mean what rocks dream of, nothing.
You suck, you jackass.
That's an Evo right there.
So, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Brother Gavin?
He got booed. He lost.
I guess he got mind. I guess he got mind blown there.
Yeah, it is mind blowing though.
So, praise. What's going on today, brother? What do we got planned in the coming weeks?
Amazing.
We should start scheduling some more debates for our wonderful audience, right? Give them some entertainment.
Yeah. We're gonna have James Tour versus Stephen Meyer. No, I have no idea. We need some debates here, so if people want to just message us.
Next week we've got John Sanford.
Oh,
taking
yeah.
on RJ Downer. We got Outcast American says, why is the best tasting things the most unhealthy? I know, man. I'm a sucker for chips. I put a movie on at night and my wife's got a couple bags of chips in the cupboard, and I say I'm just gonna have 2 or 3 or 4, and I end up eating the whole bag.
Yeah. There's Gav.
Yeah, we got a good chat today for 3:30 in the morning.
It was
What
really
is it, Saturday night?
Yeah.
Honest, yeah, SFT having a time. Yeah, it's I'm running on fumes here, so hopefully I'm helping Gavin out a little bit. But
yeah, we can probably call it here in a second.
oh no, we got another few hours to go, brother.
Yeah, we gotta get.
I found it so funny again. So in this video today, I think it's because the atheists oftentimes, I think they know that their audience for the most part, they're not going to be too fluent in genetics and things like this, so they can kind of say things and it may just kind of go over their atheist audience head, but they'll think that, oh wow, they Dr. Dan just debunked SFT or RAMAT or something. But it's so funny because once again they're attacking the mutation rates, they're attacking Dr. Nathaniel Jensen's methodology, and once again they give no testable predictions of their own. So I'm beginning at this point, I am now concluding they have no testable predictions. Finally, after months and months and months, Dr. Dan, maybe a month ago, me and him were debating in an after show. He finally presented a paper that he said was a testable prediction based on mitochondrial DNA. And I said, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm going to examine it, analyze it. RAMAT and myself did. I said, I predict that this isn't going to be a testable prediction. And it turned out it wasn't. It was based on assumption after assumption. It was, if anything, it was a retrodiction. It was retrofitted. And Matt and I did a video debunking the debunkers, Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal, on that paper. We dismantled it. So we haven't had a response yet. And we also did a video a couple days ago refuting Guts at Gibbon and Dr. Dan. So make sure you check those out because, we definitely don't want to rehash everything here. But yeah, check out those videos. But it's just funny. Yeah. It's getting sad.
Sideways. Yeah, Memory Lapse has made a good comment about the Earth being an open system. Well, the evolutionists claiming it to be an open system.
Robot.
Mr. Robot. He lasted a total of 10 seconds.
He did.
It's like if you got the Earth
Gavin,
all the power
Boring.
I got one recommendation. Gavin, make sure you got better connection for your debate. According to evolution, things are supposed to get better on their own, Gavin. So it's not your fault. Just, you know what? We'll sit here and wait 1 trillion years and maybe it'll start working.
That's electronic electronic uppy. Yeah.
Electronic. See, look at entropy even on an electronic level.
Testing.
Yeah, we hear. Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My phone is suffering severely from the second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? At first, Gavin, you should plan for some technical difficulties. Make sure there are some technical difficulties just to use that liner.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, it'll be good. I'm looking forward to it. I'll tell you what, though, it's really hard to find an open to debate.
It is. They do. They're very hesitant to debate now, creationists and theists.
It really is.
They love their safe space in the chat.
Right.
So what are going to be some of your opening arguments? So you're going to utilize the resurrection. What else, Brother Gavin?
Well, it's like a two-topic debate. He said he purposely I think he purposely tried to make it really difficult. He said, I'd love to debate you on why Christianity is superior to atheism, and then also if atheism is true. Well, the part about Christianity being superior to atheism is a no-brainer, because Christianity's held the intellectual high ground against atheism since the 1st century, and there's data to prove it. 78.3% of all Nobel Peace Prizes have gone to Christians. Well, what does that tell you? So I'll just throw those at them, like Christian marriages last longer than secular marriages. Christians actually live longer than atheists. Atheists have more depression. Atheists kill themselves more than Christians. There's all these, all the landmarks, significant landmarks in one's life are all in favor of Christianity. So that'll be easily dealt with, I think. And then it's into the weeds with about is Christianity true?
What up's in the chat?
And we've got a good chat for 3:40 a.m. By the sounds of it, Gavin, I think you're going to do a great job. The evidence is on your side. The science is on your side. Yeah. So, if you got to get into it.
I wish I knew better. Yeah, but I wish I knew better terms than just hydrated ferric oxide.
You say it pretty good. Say it 10 times fast, Gavin.
Well, the only reason I mention it is not to be a smart ass or anything, but that's the only thing I can remember from science from my school days. The technical term for rust is hydrated ferric oxide. That's all I can remember.
Here, Gavin, because you had a question on the age of the Earth thing, and I was saying that time doesn't matter. It's true, time doesn't matter. But
sure.
So I'm screen sharing. Okay, so here's a chart. Okay, brother. These are all rock samples that were taken from volcanic eruptions. Okay.
Yep.
That occurred in known history. Okay, so the best way, because we know that dating methods require a lot of assumptions. Okay. So the best way for us to determine if these dating methods are accurate and reliable, let's test rocks of known age and see what dates are derived. And we'll see just how reliable these dates and these dating methods really are. Okay, so known historical date for this volcanic eruption, 200 years. They dated it, okay, potassium to argon. Rock age by radiometric dating. Look at the date they got. 160 million, a range of 160 million years to 2.96 billion years. The rock was formed 200 years ago. So we
that's pretty that's pretty.
Oh, and there's hopefully Gavin didn't drop out, but because I'm in screen share mode, I can't tell.
I'm still here.
Okay, good. Yeah, good, brother. So, so like you're saying, I mean, there's discrepancy upon discrepancy. So even the naturalists or even the old Earth creationists would have to admit that, wow, there's plenty of reasons to doubt the reliability of these dating methods. Now, here's what's funny, okay? They want us to blindly believe dates that they give us and derive from rocks of unknown age. Okay, think about this logically. But they can't even get accurate dates from rocks of known age. So we should trust them, though, about the rocks of unknown age, the dates they get. Sorry, we're not sheep. So here's a PhD in nuclear physics. Of the 8 assumptions, none can be considered to rigorously hold in all situations. Therefore, dating by this method is at best a hypothesis concerning the age of any rock, suite, or mineral. It's certainly not a scientific fact. So every single assumption has been questioned. and has been contradicted. So that's an important.
I've got a study somewhere tucked away that I might pull out, but some creationist guys got some freshly deposited rocks after the Mount St. Helens eruption and sent them off to the labs to be dated. So, they're pretty young rocks. They just come out of an eruption, and the lab came back dating them in the millions of years, which was laughable.
Yeah, happens all the time. As you can see here's a bunch of examples. And that was the rate team that did that. Dr. Andrew Snelling, Dr. Baumgartner, Dr. Steve Austin, Dr. Humphreys, rate, if you want to look it up, radioisotopes in the age of the Earth. And what they did was they took those rock samples. Dr. Steve Austin, I believe, took rock samples from the Grand Canyon, and they all came back with discrepancies, inaccurate dates, even with their best dating methods. And look at this new study too that evolutionists can't explain this one. It was a new study. It was I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but they did DNA sequencing across 100,000 species. This was in a secular paper, and they found that what it's called, Gavin. It's DNA barcoding. So it's the CO1 gene, highly conserved mitochondrial DNA gene, that across all species, over 90%, extremely low genetic diversity, which demonstrated that they all came into existence at the exact same time. And some of the researchers even talk about how they fought it as hard as they could. It talks about how, look at this. Another unexpected finding from the study. Species have very clear genetic boundaries. Well, that's what we would expect given independent origins, separate species. So these evolutionists, they always have to invoke bottlenecks to reduce the diversity. No, the data that we get is exactly what we'd expect that biblical creation would do.
So Chris Keith sent a super chat, and then Bill Morgan has a question.
Chris Keith sent us a super chat?
Yeah, for $5. So that's really awesome. We appreciate your contribution to this channel, Chris.
Oh, brother Chris, we appreciate it. God bless, man. We love you. It's our audience, as Smokey likes to say. You guys are our life and blood. You guys are rock stars. So thanks so much for the support. We appreciate it. What's brother Bill? Bill Morgan, good to see you. Always a pleasure. You are a fan favorite here on this channel. What's his question, Praise?
What labs did those radiometric dates come from?
What labs? That's a good question. I'll have to pull up the rate papers and see. Here's the chart that I was looking at. I don't know if it says method used, potassium to argon, helium, the age derived. It doesn't say that where the rock sample was. It definitely wasn't a creationist lab. I know the evolutionists might say, were these, was there any bias going on? Definitely not. But I'll find out the exact labs for them. Good question. Here's another thing from Dr. Nathaniel Jensen, Gavin. He derived this tree. Can you see it on the screen?
Yep.
These are hundreds of mitochondrial DNA variants, okay? And this is derived without the assumption that humans and chimps are related through common ancestry. If you notice the pattern that comes about, okay? For example, these lines, the longer they are, the more DNA differences. Like, they'll say this is the African line. But without going into too much detail, if you notice here, there's 3 major nodes that jump out, okay? This is mitochondrial DNA variants. Mitochondrial DNA is only inherited from mothers. So we can trace it back to 3 major nodes, L, M, and N. Evolutionists agree to this. Well, guess what? After the flood, okay, what did we have? Noah, his wife, and Noah's 3 sons and their wives. Therefore, we've all descended from Noah's 3 daughters-in-law. And lo and behold, we see 3 major haplogroups in mitochondrial DNA. Now, is that a coincidence? Once again, perfectly fits biblical creation. You know, so it's evidence after evidence after evidence.
So George Bond has sent a $5 super chat, and he goes, "Can Evo show observable evidence for co-option?"
No, that's why even your PhDs can't give us, like in their video today with Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal, no examples, no empirical evidence of co-option. You know, all we find is, so if you look paper after paper here, scientists identify new beneficial function of endogenous retroviruses and immune response. Here's one that Dr. Rob Carter was just talking about. Endogenous retroviruses function as gene expression regulatory elements during mammalian pre-implantation embryo development. Without these retrotransposons, we wouldn't have mammals. So the co-option, all it means is, praise Gavin, if you don't know what the term means, what the evolutionists will say, okay, is that millions of years ago, we were infected with the virus, okay, that was then passed on through the germ cell lines, deactivated, okay, that's why they look at these DNA elements, these retroviruses in our genome now, and they say that these are the remnants of these ancient viral infections. They'll say at some point from the present, and then when the infection took place, somehow this virus, deactivated virus, adopted these functional roles through mutation.
Like magic.
Like magic. And it's not just, you know, a very minor functional role. I mean, these are functional roles in immune response. I mean, these ancient viruses, they really decided to hitchhike some pretty important roles, didn't they? I mean, roles in the embryo, these ALUs influencing alternative splicing, regulation, you know, regulatory activities of transposable elements. I mean, what's the most logical, I can't even say it. Logical, probable, and plausible, our boy John. Conclusion. maybe, just for a second, do you think the evolutionists could think that these DNA elements were created this way to be functional and important to living organisms?
Right.
No, they got to invent rescue devices and ad hoc, post hoc inventions, magic, like Gavin said. I mean, these are secular papers. These aren't creationist papers I'm looking at here.
Right. And they use co-option to try to refute the irreducible complexity in the flagellar motor. And what happens is they found it was in a degraded state, the shaft, the motor shaft. And it was,
SFT,
go ahead, Gavin.
Sure. SFT, are you
You're more bottom.
Okay, so now I'm left in suspense. He said, "Are you am I a what?
Are you test?
Oh, there we go. I'm back, I am back. What's that, brother Gavin?
Just curious. Are you a advocate of a global flood or local flood?
Oh, a global. Yeah, I'm a Young Earth Creationist, so global flood.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and the thing is, like I showed here, this phylogenetic tree made of mitochondrial DNA variants. I mean, it shows in our genetics we can detect the flood. You know, I mean, I guess a local flood advocate could say that we've also repopulated from Noah's 3 daughters-in-law, but that means because what this indicates is we've all descended from those 3 founding couples. So with a local flood, I imagine they would say, other women and people lived in other parts of the earth. I don't know. Praise, what would you say? I'm just kidding, brother. But this
China.
This phylogenetic tree shows that we actually descend from those three founding couples. That's what the Bible account says. There were 8 people living on the earth, and obviously we wouldn't have gotten the mitochondrial DNA from the sons, because mitochondrial DNA is only inherited from our mothers. That's where we get it from, our mothers. So
Right.
the mitochondrial DNA that the sons had, they would have had it from their mother, Noah's wife. It would have died with them, and the daughters-in-law would have been the ones to pass it on. Now they
Sure.
would have passed on the Y chromosomes, of course, but yeah. So there's the global flood right in our genetics.
Yeah, I mean, this is
That's
great. This is great because it's yet again reinforcing the Bible is always right, and the world is wrong.
correct.
Exactly.
And so here's one for you, SFT from Memory Labs. Point out polonium-216 halos found in granite rock that proves rock came into existence almost instantaneously.
Polonium-216 halos. Yeah, that would like if I get into, which I have in like a debate I had recently with David Knapp, debates I've had with Eric, I often get into not only that, but examples involving the rate team where they discovered extensive damage in the rocks. For example, radio halos, fission tracks. They've discovered helium in zircon crystals that are supposedly billions of years old. But helium is so slippery that there should be no helium in anything, 10, 20,000, tens of thousands of years old. But there's still, because it all should have leaked out. But they're finding it in zircon crystals billions of years old. So, how do they explain that? That's, but, this is getting a bit technical, and it might be unnecessary for your debate. But it's definitely evidence for, like Memory Lab said, instantaneous creation and accelerated nuclear decay, because accelerated nuclear decay would have occurred 2 times in Earth's history: the creation event and the
Right.
global flood. Those are 2 unrepeatable, unobservable events, right? I think Craze just evolved into a dolphin.
I did. That's my cousin, my sister's species.
Yeah, here's more secular papers. Look, notice using the empirical rate, they get a mitochondrial DNA ancestor of just 6,000 years. I mean, all the empirical data all the observed data is on our side. It reinforces. Look, this is a fascinating paper that I always bring up. They have no answer for, but the fact that the chimpanzee and human Y chromosomes, they are so different that when the researchers discovered the amount of similarity between human and chimp Y chromosomes, Gavin, they were shocked to the point where this is what they expected between humans and a chicken. So the chimpanzee and human Y chromosome is less than 70% dissimilar. And yet we're supposed to share a most recent common ancestor with the chimp. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's fairy tale after fairy tale. Praise, there's
So
your
they
ancestor.
say,
Hold on. So George Bond had another question. Let me pull it up real quick. George, as first preference with us, with all he contributes to this channel, really thankful to him.
He's putting your
George
kids
is
through college, Praise.
Yeah, George is awesome.
George, we love you, brother. Well, actually, you know what? Because it's George, I want to point out. So I've been going overtime the last couple weeks on this next book, Refuting the Critics. So I've gathered all of Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal and Gutsy Gibbon and all our beloved critics, all their arguments right now against the biblical creation model. So I'm going to be putting that out in book form soon, probably September. The Universal or Separate Ancestry book I have, the Made Easy one, short book, just kind of tutorial on the biblical creation model. That's out for Kindle now. But brother George Bond, he contributed 2 chapters to the Refuting Critics book on the global flood and the so-called heat problem. And I got to tell you, I've read through them.
Wow.
And they are beast mode. This George Bond, he's a warrior for the faith. I'm excited for everybody to see it. So thanks, George. Thanks for all your contribution, brother.
So he goes,
George,
standing for truth. CME says they can show observable evidence for co-option.
Who said it?
CME. So I'm guessing that is he's in here somewhere.
Oh, CME says they can show observable. Well, I've been asking for evidence. I remember I debated a biologist, or he was at least he had a bachelor's in biology on T-Jump's channel. And I asked him about the co-option, and I pointed out that the co-option is inferred, it's a guess, it's circular. Here's why it's circular. They see, and just to say, yeah, if whoever the CME says he has evidence for co-option, he doesn't. He doesn't. So it's circular. So they see these DNA elements that they call retrotransposons or endogenous retroviruses. They see them in our genetics. They see we share them with other life forms. We share many with the chimps. But then they're finding these functional roles. So they assume they have that presupposition that evolution is true. Universal common ancestry is true. Therefore, they can't conclude that these are created units of DNA function. So they have to assert that these functional roles were co-opted. Well, why were they co-opted, they say? You ask. Well, because we know evolution's true. So it's this big circular, because they need to question their basic premise before they can finally conclude that co-option is illegitimate. It's a rescue device. It's not science. It's not observed.
Sure.
Trust me, if it was observed, they'd be throwing 20 papers at us right now. Why, when I debated RJ, I asked him for evidence of co-option. You know what his answer was? He said, oh, Erica told me that you would ask that question. So I laughed and said, okay, well, what did she tell you to tell me? See, he didn't have an answer. Trust me, if there is evidence for co-option, RJ Downard, who dreams about sources, he would have provided a source. I mean, he didn't. Right. So, right. Oh, yeah. Call me emo, CME. Yeah, no. Call me emo's dreaming.
Well, I guess we can wrap it up now. We've been on for a while, so
we're just getting started.
Yeah. I know it's late for you guys, so thanks a million, SFT. I'm just going to pop into the chat now.
Gavin, anytime, brother. If you got any other questions, let us know. If you got any final questions for Praise or myself, let us know. But we're always here for you, man. God bless you. We appreciate it. We appreciate the work you're doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the help. It's all about glorifying God and putting Him first and getting Him out there. And Lord knows we need it.
Yep. So I have a question for you, Gavin. Are you a rapture believer?
Who's it from?
It's from Praise I Am That I Am.
That Praise I Am That I Am, causing trouble again.
Am I a rapture believer? Oh, Praise, don't put me on the spot like this, brother.
Praise, what are you doing, buddy? You know it's 4 a.m.
We got to strike up another theological discussion for a couple hours.
Yeah. Do you remember that?
I've got a good question for both of you, because I do find this a lot in the chat and also too in debates. I'll go to the Bible as my primary source because it is the primary source. But the accusation always comes back, you're just using the Bible to prove the Bible. How would you deal with that objection?
That was awesome.
Praise, how would you deal with that objection, brother?
I was saying that's a misrepresentation of our beliefs. The Bible just is, well, it's, but the Bible in itself is demonstrable scientifically, historically. It's valid in so many different ways. So it's not just a book that we're appealing to;
Yeah.
it's the stuff inside the book.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it's self-demonstrable. I'll just put it that way.
It's self-evident.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good answer. Because that is a common objection they'll throw at me.
Praise, I'm going to send you a video to play for the audience, just in case they don't want to quite. There's the incredible design of the human genome. Here, I'll put it to the side chat. But remember, as I always say, we can test the claims in Genesis. The Bible claims to be the history book of the universe. You know, it tells us that God created two human beings, Adam and Eve, that we all descended from. We can test these claims with modern scientific data. So they can scoff at the Bible all they want. And everything in science, everything in archaeology, eyewitness testimony, as Brother Praise always talks about when it comes to the life of Jesus Christ and his resurrection, it all confirms that the Bible is divinely inspired. The Bible is God's word, you know. Oh, that's funny.
With Adam and Eve, SFT, with Adam and Eve, do you believe they were the very first human beings, or there were other human beings around when they were around?
No, I believe they were the first human beings because
okay, gotcha.
That's what, yeah, that's what, and that's what the genetics suggests too. That's why you'll find these evolutionists are always invoking things like bottlenecks and near extinction events, because everything in our genetics, Gavin, for example, every single human being, me and you, me and somebody from across the planet, we're all 99.99999% similar. Why are we so similar if we've been accumulating mutations for millions and millions of years, according to the evolutionists? No, this is exactly what we would expect, that we're all incredibly similar if we all share a recent common ancestor, and those common ancestors, I should say, is Adam and Eve. But then the evolutionist tries and says, oh, well, you know, we used to have high genetic diversity, but, you know, 70,000 years ago, there was this near extinction event in Africa, the out of Africa extinction event, which reduced genetic diversity. And all that was left was your one Y chromosomal line and your one mitochondrial DNA line. Do you see how they're taking that which is so consistent with the Bible and they're just adding in their rescue devices and their presuppositions? It's ridiculous.
Sure.
Praise, you got that video to the side, brother? Maybe we'll end it with that one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's give Gavin. Let's say it's verifiable. Let's say it's self-verifiable. There you go.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
What are we finding now as we're studying genetics? What are kind of the things that we see now that we didn't see 50 years ago?
Well, 50 years ago, they had this simple idea that you have a gene and a gene makes a protein. That's been blown out of the water. We now know that genes are involved in making dozens, if not hundreds of proteins, and different pieces of genes are used in different proteins at different times in the cell cycle, different times in life, under different conditions, in different cells. Most of your cells in your body, they produce similar proteins than other cells, but they're different.
Huh.
So your brain cells actually produce different versions of proteins than your liver cells produce.
So how's that possible? I mean, how do they do that?
It's dynamic programming.
Hmm.
You have a gene, and this piece is used over here or over there or over there. And there's little teeny programs inside the DNA that control when and where and how to use that piece.
Mm-hmm.
But just recently, I read a paper about actually shifting of the information in the genes. So if you start at letter number 1, you can read out this information. If you start at letter number 2, you get a totally different information. How on earth did that evolve like that? I mean, if you think of if you read a story, maybe you're reading a story talking about some swashbuckling pirate. But if you start the second letter, it's a chocolate chip cookie recipe.
Praise, pause that real quick.
Like that. There's no way we could intelligently program.
Do you see how multi-dimensional our genetic code is? So, as he's saying, it's equivalent and analogous to if we're reading a book and we start at one word and we start reading it forward, and it's telling us a very specific story, but then you start at the next word and start reading from there moving forward, you're looking at a totally different story. Not to mention that the genetic code, you can get different messages reading it forwards and backwards. You know, what type of man-made book can do this, that which the DNA code can do? It's fascinating stuff. I mean,
it is this awesome design. All right, man. Do you think we should probably close her down now, or?
You know what? Let's do it. It's been an hour and a half. That's what we said we would do. So, everybody, it's been I know it was a late night one, spur of the moment. I was a bit tired, so hopefully everything came out okay. But you know, we had our brother Gavin. He's got a debate, and we wanted to help him prepare for it. So, everybody, thanks for joining. Good to see everybody. We'll have some streams coming in the next week or so. Nice to see we had a lot of people at this time, and yeah, we're going to shut it down. God bless everybody, and we appreciate our audience, and we're calling it a night. Brother
Amazing.
Frank?
Later, everyone. God bless.